Hey YouTube, this is Smoothie here, my first video, and I felt like it'd be a good thing to try to talk about what is the best way to beat Hades, escape hell, the first time, as a beginner, new to this game. I have escaped hell about 12 or 15 so times. I've done it quite a couple of times. I've really just been spending most of the time just trying to play around with different types of builds and try to get more packs of punishment, higher level difficulties. But if you're just stuck, I mean, before you get understand the game more, like your first 20, even 30 runs are just going to be death after death after death. You're looking for, hey, what's like the most straightforward way to beat this game? That is what I'm going to try to answer through talking about what I'm going to do and just showing you my gameplay and my strategies. If I generally try to take risks or don't take risks to try to beat it on the most basic, no packs of punishment difficulty with zero heat. So yes, obviously I've played this game a bit more, so I'm gonna have a lot more of perks on the Mirror of Night. But generally, well, I'm just gonna start firing off of what are the best things in the mirror to use because there's two on each side. I always use fiery presence. I don't really think that shadow presence it can be used. It's just that for you to be behind your opponents, it doesn't always happen, and depending on the weapon that you use, and one of my key weapons I usually use are projectile weapons. You tend not to get behind them, so it's not that useful. And I'd rather just use fiery presence and just do bonus damage when I'm striking them when I haven't hit them before for their first hit. Um, then Chthonic Vitality. I always prefer just getting that 3 HP every new room because you're not always going to get a room that gives you darkness. It's totally inconsistent. And I really think this is probably one of the worst things on the mirror because it's your percentage you get is like eh, it's not much. Um, y it depends on the room. It really does, but it's like it doesn't happen enough for you to get it, and I really just prefer Chthonic Vitality. Death Defiance versus Stubborn Defiance. Uh, if you're really dying, I recommend just using Stubborn Defiance. But the problem is that you're just delaying the inevitable because if you keep on dying in every room, you already have less HP than you would have had to start with, and eventually you're just gonna die when you get to, like, let's say, a boss, and you're gonna just stay dead because you just keep on this onward downward cycle of losing health, going back to 30% and then dying again, and that's not good. Um, so you have less than your total, which you would have had. I prefer Death Defiance. A because I usually let's say I don't die, but when I die, I usually will die on the last level. Where Cerberus and there's, like, the satyrs and all that crazy level. I'll explain it all throughout the way through, but you want to try to save your deaths for the end. I know you can't really save your deaths. I mean, if you die, you die. Um, but it just comes with getting better at the game. But I prefer this because it gives me more chances, especially when I get to Hades. Um, whether or not I'm going to make it, it really depends on how many opportunities I have, and I think this is just much better because if I can be smart and save it, I have three opportunities to mess up plus a lucky tooth if I throw that in there. Um, and I can always beat Hades with it. So I really think out of all these things, it's expensive. When you get it first, it's gonna cost you like I want to say like 2,000. It's really expensive. The upgrades are expensive, but just having like two of these is just better than having Stubborn Defiance. Now, if you only have enough to get one level of this right now, then you might as well just get Stubborn Defiance because at least it continues itself. Um, but yeah, if you have more than enough darkness to get more than one level, just keep on getting more Death Defiance. There's no reason not to. Greater Reflex versus Ruthless Reflex. Now you can see how I haven't got this yet, how little I care for this. Um, I just don't see the point in trying to perfectly time to get a dash when I only get like a couple of seconds of this thing. Yes, I can get the chance of not taking damage, but it's like a 1/10 chance, so that's not good. Um, and also the extra damage. Eh, It doesn't matter in the long run nearly as much as the mobility that you get from a second dash that allows me to get over a trap with less precision when you're trying to, quickly get through a room safely. Allows you to evade just more things. You're completely better off having a second dash. It just it's you're putting unnecessary risk. And remember, we're trying to beat this for the first time. Um, Always go for greater reflex. I would think that this is probably the first thing you should get, honestly, because having the second dash will help you so much more. It's just critical to the game, honestly. So yeah, definitely you want to get greater reflex first. And then I would say comes that defiance. Going down the list again, bowling blood versus abyssal blood. Now, I don't particularly like abyssal blood because the fact is that yes, movement speed is pretty important to this game, especially when you get to more faster, higher movement speed enemies that attack quicker and they can do a lot of damage to you. But if you were worried about how fast your enemies were, then you should have just been trying to get boons from oh my gosh, how am I forgetting your name? You should have been trying to get boons from Demeter, because Demeter will freeze the guys you're going against, and they will just move way slower. And honestly, that's just more consistent than trying to get this abyssal blood just off the cast. This is just more effective because I can throw it on a boss and I can just wail on them. Boiling blood is good. You always want in this game. You always want to be throwing out your cast, unless you think you're just gonna clear it out. It's not gonna matter, and you just do it for speed. But yeah, boiling blood is better. It'll really help you damage bosses better with that extra 50% you can, or just a high armor target. It's just a better idea. Stygian Soul versus Infernal Soul. This is such an obvious answer. Just get Stygian Soul. You get a cast every 3 seconds, compared to having like an extra 3 casts, but you have to wait for it to go away. That's terrible, because it takes like 10 seconds for a cast to go away, when I can just wait for 3 seconds for my cast to come back, and I can keep on throwing it. And when you combine this with the boon of Artemis that makes your cast do critical hit and they auto aim, I mean, you basically have another infernal arm on you. It's really strong. So yeah, always go with Stygian Soul. If you can. I think this is like the third upgrade that I would say you want to have this. Actually, I'm gonna keep going down the list, but this is another very important one. So you're gonna make sure you're gonna want to have Stygian Soul just for that your cast coming back. All right, I have Deep Pockets versus Golden Touch. I don't really see the point in Golden Touch. You get 5% of your current amount for each underworld region you clear. So you have to clear a region, and that's like such a small percent. Um, versus just starting off with a bit more. Starting off with a bit more helps you much more in the long run, because you're going to be able to get honestly every Hades run. I don't think people really understand how important this is. Everything you get in the first stage of Hades before you get to onto the lava world, then you start getting on Elysium, right? Your first, like the second you leave that door, you want to get as the best upgrades you can get possibly, because depending on your things later on, I hope I get this, I hope I get that. No, it's probably not going to happen. You want to start off strong in the very beginning, and this will allow you to get, let's say, an extra boon from the shop when you need it because you were 100 coins or so and so short. This is better to have this. This is the fourth perk that I'm going to say is literally the most important thing here. Thick skin versus high confidence. It's your first time, like I'm saying. If this is, regardless if it is or not, this is just the quickest way to beat it. And it's assuming that you're gonna take a bit of damage. High confidence is nice to use, but if you're not really speed running, I just think thick skin is entirely better, because starting off again with more health requires you to have to give that trade off to go for a Centaur's Heart in other rooms when you could have been getting a boon instead. Way less. I think the amount of times that I usually will go through the run and I'll only try to get 4 Centaur's Hearts. I don't really need more than that, especially with the fact that I have several Death Defiances. You just want to make sure you can increase your survivability early on, and again, you save yourself the option of having to keep on going for Centaur's Hearts over and over again. Because let's be honest, having 300, 400 health doesn't really matter if you don't have the boons to back up your damage. It doesn't make sense. Then family favorite versus privilege status. Um, I don't really like privilege status because it requires you to have a curse effect, and a lot of the boons I like to use personally, I usually don't try to go for those. Like we're talking about like Athena is weak, or we're talking about Dionysus' drunk effect. Yeah, I usually don't try to go for those. Instead, I try to go for a nice healthy mix of boons purely because there's a lot of like nice interplay you can get between them. And I'd rather go for family favorite because I can just buff my total damage overall. And usually I'll go through a run. Again, it depends on RNG, and I'll have about 4 or 5 different boons from different gods. So that's an extra 20-25% damage, which is I think much better in the long run versus an extra 20 damage against foes who have at least 2 status curse effects. Like, come on, 2. And so this would force you to make a build around putting curse effects, and those are not rooms. Those aren't builds that are particularly good, I would say, for the first time. They're fun to mess around with. Don't get me wrong. I just don't really play like that. Then Dark Foresight versus Olympian Favor. You could argue either one for this, to be honest. I just would prefer to have Dark Foresight to have these better rooms because honestly, was going to help you is getting the better rooms early on. You don't want to wait until Elysium to get a Daedalus hammer. You really don't. You really want to get a Daedalus hammer in Tartarus as soon as you can. Whether that be right up the gate or an early on, I want that as soon as I can. I don't want to have to, and most of the time these boons, with the rarity, talking about like here with the rarity from normal, rare to epic, I I don't really see this as that necessary. It can help, have the extra rare chance, but again, rare isn't even that good. It's just better than your normal. So I just don't really see it compared to as being as critical as having good rooms with Dark Foresight. Um, then, uh, God's Pride, chance for your boon to be epic versus God's Legacy. You could argue either for this. In fact, if you're doing like with family favor, you're anticipating trying to get multiple gods, you're gonna get more duos more often. Then yeah, that would be good. I would just argue that because there's just more boons that you're. This is for all boons. This is for all boons, epic, versus having just the occasional one legendary or duo. Eh, it's not that critical, and also I'm not banking a build on getting legendaries. I'm trying to make a build that is generally accessible to most things except for um a few couple required things. And then lastly, Fated Persuasion versus Fated Authority. I would rather go for a Fated Persuasion because having a better well or having a better boons is more something I care about than the having a room with a chest in it, having a room with a chaos portal in it. Not important. So that's my overview of the mirror, and now I'm going to get on to my overview of my weapons and what I'll be doing for this playtest. Okay, so first thing, if just getting through the game quickly, not just quickly, but like efficiently, I really recommend when you want to change your keepsakes as you go through. So you don't want to start off with a lucky tooth. You want your lucky tooth to be probably your last thing that you put on free for the last level of hell with Cerberus. So on your first level, for my playstyle, I always go for Adamant Arrowhead because I want to get those Artemis critical hits off on my weapon immediately. But if you aren't as much into that and you're more, let's say, into the deflect of Athena or the lightning effects of Zeus, go for them instead. But I do think that you should always have one of these as your first um keepsakes, unless of course you're going for a lambent plume the entire time, or you're going for a pierced butterfly the entire time to stack your damage. That can be a nice risky build. But again, I'm not trying to go risky. I'm trying to go safe. You want to beat the game. You're struggling. My strategy is going to be to first just go for Adamant Arrowhead. You're gonna get this if you give a gift to Artemis if you don't have this already, by the way. And then after that, when you get into the next stage, you're gonna kind of evaluate how much you're gonna need the coin purse, or are you low on health and you'd rather go for another opportunity to not die with a lucky tooth. I usually you're kind of screwed if you're using this early on, so again, that's why I was like, you want to be that your last resort on the last possible time you could change your keepsake. But usually after I use the adamant arrowhead, I'll just immediately switch to always using evergreen acorn because it can help me to just take less damage on a boss overall, and I can just get through it sooner. It's also sometimes not a bad idea to use a cosmic egg because you can get a couple of gates of chaos, but it's just not that worth it because again you don't know what you're going to get, and a lot of times the drawbacks can be pretty negative. And also once you get out of Tartarus, it becomes increasingly unsafe to play around with the chaos negative boons. I hate messing around with a slowness boon in Elysium when almost all the troops the ghosts I go against are going to be much stronger. Like, the chariots that are annoying as hell that follow you around. I just don't want to have to go through that. So my safe strategy is go for Adamant Arrowhead, use Evergreen Acorn all the way up until the last time you can exchange your keepsake and get the Lucky Tooth. Now on to the weapons. Now I think that this part makes this game fun is all the different weapons you can use, but there is a definite hierarchy in which weapons, even without considering their aspects, just off the top. Um, to me, again, this is my perspective. The best things are the ranged weapons, and not the throwing of the spear, the throwing of the shield, but specifically the adamant rail and the bow Karnak. Now, why you ask? Well, besides just the range damage, it's useful. Yes. They have much more area of effect damage, and I mean that by Karnak can have a array of all these bows that come out, and the adamant rail can have a bomb attack, and you can just devastate crowds instead of me having to come in with the sword and just keep on dashing attack, risking taking damage. That's not good. Again, we're trying to be conservative here, not take damage, but if we can, okay. But usually you'll get yourself out a lot more situations. You put yourself in a lot less risk by using these projectile weapons. And they just are just consistently what I use the most to escape and have a ton of HP left over. I mean, I did a run before, and I didn't have to use the Death Defiance once at all. I made it all through an entire life, didn't have to use any of my second chances, and this was a run when I had both the Adamant Rail and the Bow Karnak. They're just the best weapons in the game, in my opinion. Now, which aspect should you be using? That's a different question altogether. I think that the aspect of Hera is useless when you are using um, the mirror perk that makes your cast recharge quicker, because you're better off just attacking with your cast, and like having a quicker drops time isn't, again, not that useful because you're getting your thing in 3 seconds. That doesn't really matter. And plus you're giving up damage for what these can do for just the chance of like getting something nice off of with your cast, hitting with your cast. If you have build built around cast damage, I get it, okay, but I don't really think it's that good. And your cast is already a projectile too, so why would I try to load my cast into the bow? It's a silly weapon, and I don't really understand using it. Aspect of Chiron, this is the best bow. Even with the aspect of Rama, you just don't really do enough. Like, this is just has the highest damage. You hit one guy and you just keep on firing on the same guy because the same target. This is the default. this is probably what you have because again, it's not cheap. I don't have this unlocked, but I can tell you from my opinion, this is probably the second best thing to use, um, instead of just the default. But I can. This is the best thing you can use right now. Um, and then to the Rails aspect of Zagreus, just the default. It's the worst one. It is the worst one. Um, you're not really. You shouldn't be using um the adamant rail to really shoot. You should be using it to with the special effect. You should like your shooting is just to cover fire for while you're waiting for your special to reload. Because the more important thing is that you get the special blast damage, increased damage. So that's also why I don't think the aspect of Hesi is really that good unless you max it out of the way. And honestly, it's a lot of to put in just for a weapon that really only becomes practical when you have it max. So just like I can understand why you might not have Coronact upgraded for the aspect of Chiron, even though it's the best. It's really only as practical when you have max. So yeah. Really though, if you're just starting off, I would say you might as well just go ahead and get the aspect of Ares at its default level because it's better than the bonus ammo capacity you get from the default aspect. And okay, so I'm going to be using the aspect of Chiron with this. I'm going to use no heat, no pact of punishment. I'm just going to go through, and I'm really banking on this build for immediately off the bat to get special critical damage from Artemis.